And with this fucking video, I am ready for the sweet release of death. I've got a sunburn specifically for this because it shows the level of psychological pain that I'm going through on a physical level. So let's go. Alright, now as we do this little review, I want to bring to everyone's attention the title, since that is the first thing a person notices when it comes to reading a work of fiction or non-fiction or a memoir or whatever, is this. Like, when a person reads a title of a book, or the preface, they are expecting some sort of outline as to what is being covered in the book, or what type of story the protagonist is going to be going through. No spoilers, of course, but usually there's some sort of rigid outline as to what the protagonist or the person writing the memoir is going to be discussing in the memoir. Instead, it proceeds to boil down to a bunch of pointless boo-hooing about the other people that said mean stuff about them, without taking 5 seconds of accountability or 5 seconds to even think for even a moment that they themselves could be accountable for their own actions. That hollow platituding immediately makes it hard for someone to take the novel itself seriously. The title, as well as I've bumped before, makes no sense. Not in service is a term the author shoehorned into the second one in an attempt to make people feel ashamed for not believing their politics. It was never about wanting to help a person better understand what it means to be a person. It was more about trying to shoehorn a message in there that obviously had no reason to be there. It was simply a matter of trying to shame people for disagreeing with them than it was for actually trying to help someone open their mind to new horizons. This was never a matter of trying to broaden people's horizons and expose them to differing ideas. It was all a matter of saying that their idea is superior. And the fact that the title Not in Service was only used as a cheap insult towards people that didn't agree with the author of this insane delusional pile of horse shit is just another reason this book fucking sucks. But let's go further. Now here's the thing, anyone that enjoys reading books knows that there are certain things you cannot do when it comes to writing a book. You cannot use different colors on different pages since most pages are written in black and white. And the reason that they're written in black and white is so that the reader can actually fully read the text. What this spastic fucking moron decides to do instead is make entire paragraphs in candy apple red, which is really hard to see on a white sheet of paper, regardless of whether or not you have your brightness turned way the fuck up or not if you're reading it from a Kindle or phone. More or less, it's already making the reader strain their eyes to read it more because it's harder to read a bright color against a white background. That's the reason people use black font. It's because it's easier to fucking see. Not to mention the myriad of spelling and punctuation errors that fucking litter the pages regardless of how many times the morons obviously attempted to self-proofread. And that's the problem. This whole thing reads like a draft that was never revised. Because essentially what goes on here is you have someone who's saying that they know better than everyone, that they're smarter than everyone, that everyone's just a stupid fucking bigot compared to them. But then at the same time they make very simplistic errors that could have easily been corrected had they actually cared enough to take the time to do it. Which is obviously not what this person intended. They were not trying to write something that would be painstakingly thought out and well written. They thought about, hey, I need to write this in a hurry to save my fucking ass, so I better write it quickly. But that's the problem. A lot of the words in these paragraphs are either poorly spelled, misspelled entirely, there's no punctuation, the grammar or syntax makes no damn sense. It boils down to the same degree of nonsense as someone like Julius Caesar screaming about handbags. It's the same level of ludicrous. The only difference is instead of having it simply be something that you know you're never going to see because Caesar's dead, it becomes something that you see written across the page when there's obviously something that has no idea what the hell they're doing, trying to tell themselves they do. There are plenty of other people on Amazon who've written and published books that are actually worth the money they're printed on. For example, books like Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury, excuse me. Which, although albeit not published through Amazon, you can buy them on Amazon, and they are actually 10 times more enjoyable than anything this cancerous fucking wannabe of an author is capable of writing. And I'm not saying this because of personal disdain for this person. If I had no idea who the fuck this person was at all, and bought the book on a whim, and read it, I would think this person's fucking insane. And probably mentally fucked up, considering how they decide to write. All I'm saying is that there's so much punctuation that it's fucking painful to see all the errors and misspellings and mispronunciations. It's hard, okay? It's really fucking hard to look at that and think that anyone at all that's above the age of 10 wrote this shit and then believed by some psychotic delusion that it was actually going to make them money. Alright, next let's talk about the setting. If you thought there was a setting, there isn't. There is no setting whatsoever. None. We know the year only because the dumb shit put the year in the publishing date. That is it. When it comes to where they are, and what the weather is like, and what kind of environment they are in, they go into no detail whatsoever. None. Not a single iota of information is passed on from the author to the reader to give the reader any sort of understanding as to where they are and what the place is like. Instead, the person is more devoted to shitting on the character of others and running down their integrity as a human being than they are actually concerned about what's going on around them. The fact that there is no setting makes this uninteresting. It's an uninteresting piece of literature because of the fact the person cares so little about what they're producing and so much about what they're doing to themselves in terms of how they're destroying their own reputation. And it's sad, really, because as someone who enjoys reading, it hurts to see someone try to brand themselves as an author while at the same time be so fucking callous with their blatant disregard for literary style. They make no effort whatsoever to tell a story or to help relay the events of a story or try to establish a story at all. There are no attempts whatsoever to identify with those around them to maybe give the setting some type of realism because there is no fucking setting. Essentially, it's like this person's floating around in a fucking void, drifting through YouTube, and fighting with myself and other people I associate with, while at the same time pissing and moaning because we mock him for being a moron. And that's exactly how the setting translates to, because there is no fucking setting mentioned, except YouTube. The problem with the characters in this book goes as follows. There are very few characters that actually have names, and the characters that do have names just because the author wanted to give them names. Like people like Jessica and Christine and other people that associate with this person, he ends up developing a weird stalker sort of affection towards them. Instead of simply respecting them as people and appreciating the kindness they happen to extend to him, he decides to start creeping on them and start fantasizing about them immediately. Now, he never says this directly. However, it's heavily implied with a lot of the things the person says. It said that if a person loved him as well, this would be perfect. Like, these people do not love you. Like, you don't just come to love someone immediately. Love is patient, love is kind. Love takes time to really form. Relationships are not as simple as, oh, you look at me, now we're together. Like, relationships take time and energy. It's not as simple as a relationship being formed in an instant. Relationships sometimes take years, maybe even decades, to really solidify and form some sort of solid foundation to be built on. Relationships are built on trust, respect and mutual affection between one another. It's not as simple as, well, I happen to be here and you happen to be here, so we're together now. No, that's not how that works. Relationships take time to build because sometimes people have their own personal baggage they have to put up and hang up or try to dispose of or deal with before they're ready for a relationship. And trying to immediately insinuate that someone immediately forms a relationship just because you make eye contact with them is fucking insane. It's something that a fucking crazy person thinks. It is. It's fucking weird. This isn't like a friendship where like people form a bond based upon mutual interest and respect towards one another. Instead, it's like it's obsession. It's like some weird Freudian bullshit's going on, and for whatever reason, people are not calling it as they see it. Well, I'm just gonna call it right now. I think the only reason that he has this like weird fucking affection and this weird like separation anxiety type behavior towards women is because him and his mommy didn't get along very well. When mommy found out he was a pedo, she kicked him the fuck out of her house because he got on a government watch list. And we know this because he was tweeting death threats at the president for the first 2 months after the inauguration. Like a fucking psycho. But the fact is, the characters go nowhere. They establish nothing and they don't really add anything to the story. It's essentially like putting a bunch of mannequins behind yourself to make you feel like you're actually part of something. But the reality is the people there are not really defined. There's no personality traits. There's nothing there to give a person any actual depth. And if these are real people and he's giving them so shallow of a appearance in this, it's kind of doing a disservice to those people because it's more or less portraying them as a bunch of tired stereotypes that represent social workers and homeless people. And the worst part is when it comes to characters like Raquel, for example, who worked at the shelter, who was one of the workers, who installed cameras and didn't give him free Wi-Fi because, if he doesn't have Wi-Fi, he can't screech on the internet. But the fact is, when it comes to him talking about Raquel, he treats her as though she's like the worst, like neo-fascist, like racist, human-slaughtering, genocidal, homophobe, maniac, religious fundamentalist there ever was. When the fact is, the person was unable to do this stuff for him because they did not have the funding to do so. They are not obligated to give him internet access just because he's a retard. But the fact is, the way he talks about other people in this book, the way he characterizes those he doesn't like, he goes above and beyond to try to shit on them as a person. And for whatever reason, if they happen to be neutral or they happen to be fine with him or interact with him at all in a positive way or a neutral way, he immediately goes above and beyond as well to say that these people are the biggest shining examples of what a good person would be. And honestly, it kind of reminds me of how Gerg apparently talked about his exes back when he was in school. Because one minute they'll be saying something completely positive about someone, and then someone else, they will immediately get like some of the worst like rave reviews where they're basically getting fucking destroyed verbally by someone simply being ass mad that they didn't get what they wanted out of them. And the strange part is, it translates too fucking well to how he behaves. It really does. Because when you look at how he characterizes people, and you look how he talks about people, he treats everyone like they're one-dimensional, like their existence itself is just a tired, bland stereotype. And really, that just explains how stupid the author really is. The author doesn't see nuance or depth in anything. The author more or less wants to write everyone as a stereotype because that's all he knows. That's all he can really understand. If he can't apply a stereotype to a person who he does not understand, who he cannot fucking categorize or put in a box and sort, then he will try to put them in the box anyway, because that's all he knows how to do. It's like his psyche refuses to accept the fact that not every paradigm alive, or every paradigm existing within political orthodoxy, is inherently designed to be used on everyone. And that's the problem. His whole narrative means you have to be one or the other, but his whole mindset prevents him from accepting the fact that politics, as well as many other things, are a gradient. And because of that, he needs to characterize people in such a way that he refuses to accept the fact that not everyone in the world is going to be exactly the way he wants them to be, or exactly the way he thinks they should be. And that's why that's why you get like these sort of angry, freaking, shrieking reactions where essentially he's unable to decide what to do with himself. So even though everything completely flies in the face of what he's saying, he says it anyway because it's all he knows. That's the only thing he can do. Because like any SJW cry hard, the only thing he knows how to do is to keep doubling down, even in situations where he doesn't know what he's talking about. And honestly, the way he writes characters in the book, you can kind of see why people make fun of him, because he obviously doesn't know how people actually work. Yes, I know I'm wearing a different shirt because it took multiple different time, took a while to get this thrown together. So, nevertheless, I was sitting on some notes for the character part of the review, and I feel like I should jump on those really quick and bring those up before I actually go into the biggest critique that I really have that this review happens to entail. My notes. Oh, here they are up there. The saddest part of this is the fact that the author apparently does not know how to write human characters. The author is not able to make people relate or behave naturally in what this person claims to be a memoir. The fact that the person claims it's a memoir but makes no effort to actually ensure that any of the people mentioned have actually been given humanistic or human traits to help them better be defined as another human being that's living in the world we are in right now makes it harder to be taken seriously. The author has obviously taken no effort to actually ensure that the people mentioned in the story are either A, aware of it, or B, actually want to be in it. It seems like the characters are added to the story only to be used as write-offs or write-ons, depending upon whether or not the author personally feels like these characters have either wronged him or aided him, which is a major issue when it comes to writing a memoir. You don't add people that are just mere acquaintances that play no significant role in the story whatsoever, mention them by name, even if they don't really know it, just to then utilize their presence in the book as a way to either write yourself out of a bad situation or to cast the person you're mentioning as the villain of the story, when you obviously make no effort to actually address anything at all that you've said or done. When a memoir is written, it's supposed to be written honestly. It's supposed to be written with all the events that occurred from start to finish to tell the complete story. If the author is selectively choosing bits and pieces of a narrative to throw out and then keep for their own personal convenience, then it's no longer a memoir and it starts to become more of a smear piece. That's a fact. The characters in this story make no sense, as I've said before. They make no fucking sense as actual people because they are not given human characteristics at all. They are essentially about as good as having a cardboard cutout take up space in the story, more or less to act as filler. This person does nothing and means nothing. They are there for no fucking reason at all, except to be there. Just like part 2. The reason part 2 sucked so fucking much was because it was essentially just a giant burning turd that had people involved in the story that didn't really matter or mean anything in the grand scheme of events that were being recorded by the so-called memoir. Which is strange when you think about it because the author can't stay philosophically consistent. In my stream where I read the entire second book, the author more or less said that someone's pregnant with children. It's like, okay, well, if they're pregnant and you just said children, but if children don't exist, then what the fuck is she pregnant with? But if children do exist and you acknowledge their existence, that means that age would exist because children are a certain group of people that are classified beneath a certain degree of maturity. And age is usually a marker for maturity. But nevertheless, I digress. This person makes no effort at all to ensure that they know what the hell they're doing. It's obvious from the way that there are punctuation and spelling errors everywhere. But let's get on to the biggest reason why this attempt at a novel, or memoir, whatever you'd prefer to call it, other than a polished, burning turd, is just truly horrible. So let's get on with the last bit of it. Like, the biggest reason among all the other ones mentioned before that this book is complete shit is the fact that the author is a professional perpetual victim. And they seem to be trying to make this their job, is to make themselves the victim by any means necessary. They throw themselves into a situation saying a whole bunch of stupid fucking horse shit, and then when people give them backlash, they say they're the victim. Whenever they do something fucked up, they're the victim. When they do something creepy that people are obviously upset about and they know for a fact they look bad, they're the victim. When people say negative shit about them as a result of their behavior, it's them that's the victim, and not the people who they're harassing. This is someone who's made it a point to seek victimhood only because they assume victimhood will bring success. These are the same type of fucking people that SJWs flock to because they believe that if a person walks out of a room screaming about how oppressed and victimized they are by the mean, evil, meanie people that are saying things about them because they've done stupid, fucked up bullshit, they intentionally decide to they formulate a sob story after provoking people so that they could attempt to use the sob story as a reason as to how they are not responsible for the things they do. It's as simple as that. This is a person that's obviously trying to seek out victim status, specifically for the virtue that they believe it's going to have. That's really all it is. It's a professional victim attempting to virtue signal in a society that's filled with a subculture of perpetual professional victims. A victim culture produces professional victims, and it comes forward whether it be from people like from BLM, the radical feminists, the pedophiles, aka the MAPS. It's all the same shit. It's all the same bunch of it's the same perpetual victim mentality. They want to be victims, so they formulate sob stories. They look for an excuse, and then they use that excuse as much as they can and try to ride the waves until it's finally over. Or if that doesn't work, they just perpetuate a sob story. If there isn't an example that they can use as a sob story, then they will make one up. And if they can't make one up, they are more than willing to put themselves in the middle of the drama to fabricate some bullshit with the intention of trying to get people to attack those that have criticized them. That's all it is. That's all it has been. That's all it will be. This is simply the actions of a professional victim trying to pretend that they are not a professional victim. This is not someone who's legitimately being victimized or being treated wrong. This is the behavior of someone who is fully aware of what their actions could mean for other people, including those that are completely defenseless. And they are knowingly acting in such a way because they are trying to profit from the victimhood that they assume these actions are synonymous with. That's really all it is. This is someone who's clearly trying to turn their pedophilia into a profit. They are trying to make themselves a victim and a figurehead for people who they believe are oppressed, just so they can tell themselves that they're some sort of hero or martyr for people who are misunderstood, or for the everyday person who's dealing with the frustrations of the everyman. No, you're not. What you are is a retarded, brain-dead, delusional, fucking fish-faced pedophile who's trying to tell himself that his existence is more meaningful than everyone else's just because he seeks out victimhood. That's really all it is. This is the behavior of a professional victim playing at the role of a professional victim. That's all it is. It's a professional victim trying to pretend that they are something other than that. And I'm sorry, but nobody is stupid enough to actually believe that, except you. And the only reason that you believe it is because if you didn't, you would have to accept the fact that you've been a giant piece of shit to people for 2 fucking years, and have done nothing in the process, but made yourself look like a giant cunt to everyone. Hardly anyone believes you. Even people like Michael Mattis and Michael Helm, who are also maps in their own words, have more or less decided to distance themselves from you because you are so fucking stupid and crazy that even they refuse to be around you. And if even the dumbass pedophiles avoid you, then you might want to consider where the fuck you stand. Above all else, the author cannot take criticism at all. That's all they are. They're a professional victim who seeks out victimhood and then cries when they get what they expect to get. I hope the person that wrote this decides to take a long walk off a short cliff. This is absolute shit. If you like what I did here, feel free to click the subscribe button right down there. Remember to click the bell icon because otherwise you won't be notified because YouTube's having a bit of a seizure. But I hope that I was able to entertain people, maybe give people a couple laughs, or maybe try to promote some thought or discussion. Anyway, thank you all for watching. My nose is itching a little bit, and see you next time.